Okay, so here we go. It's a state slipping deeper and deeper into the Republican camp, but one Democrats refuse to let go. It's time for the Bertelsmann Foundation Election Dispatch from Florida. All right, let's start off just talking about how big and diverse Florida is. 22 million people, 30 electoral college votes. If you start deep in the panhandle and drive to Miami, it's going to take you over 10 hours. And ever since the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore was decided on dangling chads and Supreme Court justices, Florida has been the epitome of the swing state in the minds of many people. Thing is, it's getting a lot less swingy. Trump won it in 2016 and 2020, and the Republican candidate has won the office of governor in every election since 1994. In fact, Florida Republicans hold supermajorities in both the state's Senate and House, and hold all of the state's executive offices. According to a Vox report, Florida is voting at a clip of about 8% more Republican than the rest of the country. Throw in the fact that Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate is in Palm Beach, and Florida is basically the center of the Republican world. Now, of course, Biden won the presidency in 2020 without winning Florida, and that's kind of a big deal, because before that, it had only been 2 times since 1928 that somebody won the presidency without winning Florida. But the question remains, why did Florida become more Republican? Well, as we've seen in a lot of states, these statewide elections often come down to who turns out more. A rural, ex-urban vote that tends to be heavily Republican, or an urban core that tends to be very Democrat. And that's certainly the case here. Now, Miami, that's a very Latino city. Upwards of 70% of its population is Hispanic. And you would think, hey, that's good for the Democrats, right? Across the board, Democrats can usually count on between 60 to 70% of the Latino vote. But not in Miami. Large swaths of Miami's Latino population come from Cuba, they come from Venezuela, and they left home often to escape hard left regimes. These are voters that don't like socialism, they don't want to hear about improved relations with Cuba, and they're becoming increasingly reliable Republican voters. That's bad news for the Democrats. If they can't run up the score in Miami, they're not going to win. Another thing, led by Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida has gone hard in fighting the nation's culture wars. Anything that's getting public funding or tax breaks, we're talking universities, public television, Disneyland, they got to stay in the good graces of Republican officials if they want to continue operating. Florida, of course, also mostly stayed open during the COVID crisis. It was famously called the Free State of Florida. And Governor DeSantis has since even signed a bill that bans the government or businesses from enforcing a mask mandate. So we can sit here and debate about whether those are good ideas or not, but the data is clear. During these years, the state has become increasingly Republican. So what does that all mean for this election in 2024? Well, Trump holds a strong lead over Kamala Harris, 7 or 8 percentage points according to the website 538. So the question becomes, just how hard will Harris fight for Florida? Is it worth it to her to sink precious resources into a state she's probably not going to win? Well, her campaign is building pathways to victory that don't require Florida. But we do expect her to be active here. If nothing else, she can inject a shot of life into the state's Democrats and maybe help them close that gap in the state's legislature. And we may already be seeing that happening. Just in the days after Harris announced, 6,000 people signed up to volunteer for her campaign in Florida. They're planning to open new offices and hire more staff. They figure, hey, we can force Trump and the Republicans to defend Florida, draining some of their resources that they would certainly rather be spending in the Midwest. So it's all a high-stakes game of chess. Look, maybe this is not the swing state that it was in year 2000, but it's still an important piece of the puzzle. And we'll be watching very closely here at the Bertelsmann Foundation as we head down the stretch.